Hey guys, tonight we're diving into the world of food. No, not the food you're used to munching on at home, but the beginnings of something far more convenient. Picture yourself walking through the cobbled streets of 16th century London, the scent of freshly baked pies and roasted meats filling the air. You pause by a bustling stall, where a vendor hands you a hot meal wrapped in paper, ready to be devoured on the go. This was the very beginning of fast food. You probably won't survive long in a time where hygiene wasn't exactly a priority, but hey, it was a lot more thrilling back then, wasn't it? So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. I'd also love to know where you're tuning in from and what time it is where you are. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. Fast food, something we often take for granted today, actually has its roots in 16th century England. It was an era of booming trade, bustling markets, and increasing urbanization. But as the cities grew, so did the need for something quick, convenient, and relatively inexpensive. Enter the humble street vendor. You've probably heard of the pies they sold, but have you ever wondered why the English were so obsessed with food on the go? Well, these early merchants were more than just casual food slingers. They were pioneers in what would eventually become the fast food industry. You see, in a time when people didn't exactly have a microwave in the kitchen or takeout apps at their fingertips, the street vendor was the next best thing. And here's the kicker. This wasn't just a way to get a quick bite between errands. It was, in fact, a revolution in how food could be consumed, shaping everything from the way we eat to how we view food in modern times. So, let's take a stroll back in time and see how those early English merchants invented something we all know and love today: fast food. You've probably found yourself hurrying through the streets of London on a busy morning, the bustling sounds of people and the clatter of carts filling your ears. But here's the thing, you're not alone. Back in the 16th century, the streets of London were alive in much the same way. The only difference? Instead of Starbucks cups and smartphones, you had the smell of roasting meat, sizzling pies, and the clanging of metal pans filled with hot, fried food. This was the birthplace of street-side food vendors, and believe it or not, they were the first seeds of fast food as we know it. It's hard to imagine, but the idea of grabbing a quick meal from a stand or stall wasn't always the norm. Before merchants turned to selling hot food in the streets, most people had to prepare their own meals or rely on family-run inns and taverns. But when cities like London exploded in population during the 16th century, the need for portable, easy meals grew. As the number of travelers, traders, and workers swelled, so did the demand for something fast, filling, and easy to consume. Fast food, as it was then known, was born. Let's imagine the scene. You, a busy Londoner, are making your way to work. But instead of stopping for a fancy coffee, you stop at a pie stall, grabbing a hot meat pie wrapped in greaseproof paper for a few pennies. You bite into it as you walk, savoring the flavor of spiced beef, the crust still warm from the oven. It's not much different than the fast food we eat today, except back then, it was all about simplicity and speed. The vendors who ran these stalls were savvy, capitalizing on the rapidly changing urban landscape to create a food culture that people could grab and go. Historians still debate the exact moment when food stalls like these became popular in the streets of London, but by the mid-1500s, these vendors were on nearly every corner. The charm of the street-side stall was that it made eating quick and affordable, a luxury not everyone had before. With cities growing and streets congested with the hustle and bustle of life, these food vendors became essential, and the stage was set for fast food to evolve. By now you might be wondering, why did English merchants suddenly see the need for quick meals on the go? Sure, the streets were getting crowded, but was that really enough to spark a food revolution? Well, there was more to it than just sheer convenience. During the 16th century, London and other burgeoning cities were becoming economic hubs. Trade was booming and merchants were getting more ambitious. It wasn't just about selling goods anymore, it was about catering to the growing needs of a society that was changing fast. And in the midst of this transformation, the English merchants saw an opportunity. The basic ingredients for fast food were already there: wheat for pies, salt for preservation, and meats brought in from the countryside. But what was missing? Efficiency. The fast-paced, bustling nature of city life demanded that people eat on the move, often between work or errands. The old method of cooking a meal from scratch at home was no longer viable for the common worker or merchant. Enter the food stall. But this wasn't just about food being ready in a few minutes. It was about food that could be eaten quickly and easily, often without a seat or table in sight. People didn't need a fancy meal, they just needed something fast, hot, and filling. Historians still argue whether it was simply the rise of the working class, who needed something they could eat on the go, or if it was a deliberate attempt by these early merchants to create a new market. Whatever the reason, the fact remains that food stalls started multiplying. These merchants were savvy, offering up food that was quick to make, easy to carry, and filling. Pies, bread rolls, and meat skewers became the perfect fast food option for a city on the move. What's more, these early vendors didn't just sell food, they sold a concept. They sold time. Imagine a typical workday in 16th century London. You're running errands, rushing to meetings, and then, suddenly, there's a food stall. You don't have to waste time sitting down to a formal meal. You grab something quick, devour it on the move, and get back to your day. Fast food didn't just satisfy hunger. It fit into the rhythms of a bustling, busy life. Now you might be thinking, okay, so food on the go, but what really set it apart from what people were eating before? Well, in the 16th century, the food you grabbed from a stall wasn't just your average fare. It was a flavor explosion that would have been far more exciting than the bland meals of yesteryear. While pies and meat skewers may seem basic, they were anything but. The real kicker? The spices. You see, this was the time when the spice trade was booming, and exotic flavors were starting to make their way into English kitchens. Vendors didn't just slap some salt and pepper on their meats and call it a day. They used a mix of spices like cinnamon, ginger, and cloves, ingredients that came from far-off places like India and the Middle East. And if you were lucky, you might even get a taste of nutmeg, which was worth its weight in gold at the time. Food wasn't just about filling up your stomach, it was an experience. Spices turned a simple meat pie into something far more exciting. It wasn't just about practicality, it was about making sure that, even in the middle of a busy day, you were still getting a little taste of luxury. Historians still debate whether the explosion of these spices was a deliberate attempt by merchants to elevate the idea of street food, or if it was simply a byproduct of trade routes that connected England to far-flung corners of the world. Either way, these flavors didn't just make fast food tasty, they made it exotic, an experience that was different from anything that had come before. This wasn't just food for the working class anymore, it was a sign of status, a way for people to enjoy something that felt special, even if only for a moment. Now, picture yourself standing in front of one of these vendors. The hot, spicy smell hits you as you take in the array of food on display. Pies with golden, flaky crusts filled with rich meats and spices, sizzling sausages on skewers, and bread rolls, warm and inviting. You buy a pie, take a bite, and immediately feel the warmth of the spices dance across your tongue. It's fast food, but it's far from bland. The spices add an extra layer of richness, turning a quick meal into something unforgettable. And it's not just food, it's a taste of the world. Imagine now, walking down the narrow streets of London, with the sound of busy merchants and the constant rush of pedestrians all around you. Amid this scene, you come across a unique type of street food vendor, not the usual stall on the corner, but one that has taken to the waterways. Yes, the English were so enamored with their new fast food concept that they even took it to sea. Fast food, it turns out, wasn't just confined to the land, it found its way onto the riverbanks and the open waters, thanks to the burgeoning merchant fleets. The ships that plied the trade routes along the Thames and beyond were not only carriers of goods like spices, textiles, and metals. They also carried the fast food culture with them. Some of the first food vendors actually started selling food on boats, floating down the river with hot meals for hungry sailors and workers. The rise of fast food wasn't limited to the landlocked cities. it expanded into the maritime world. And it makes sense, doesn't it? The ship workers, sailors, and traders out at sea didn't have the luxury of sitting down for a full meal. They needed something quick, portable, and satisfying. Historians still argue whether food on the water was truly the catalyst for fast food spread across England, or if it was simply a reflection of how commerce and trade were changing the food scene. But one thing is certain: food on the Thames was a game changer. Picture yourself on one of these boats, swaying gently in the river, a hot meat pie in hand as you eat while looking out over the water. The merchant boats were essentially mobile kitchens, bringing food directly to people who didn't have time to stop for a meal on land. And while we might take food delivery for granted today, back then it was revolutionary. The reality was that as English merchants ventured farther afield, they didn't just bring back exotic spices. They also brought back the knowledge of how to prepare and present food in ways that were fast and practical. Whether on land or sea, fast food was no longer confined to the taverns and inns. It was for everyone everywhere. And the best part? The concept was so simple it worked. By now you're probably starting to notice a pattern. These early fast food vendors were nothing if not resourceful. They were nimble, adapting to the times, and one of the most brilliant moves they made was tapping into something already ingrained in English culture: marketplaces. Think about it. Medieval markets were some of the most vibrant places in town. They were bustling hubs of commerce where traders, farmers, and craftsmen came together to sell their goods. And just like the merchants who sold spices, textiles, and wool, food vendors found their own niche. They set up their stalls right alongside the regular merchants, selling their quick meals to the crowds. Now imagine you're walking through one of these early English markets. The air is thick with the scent of fresh bread, roasted meats, and the sweet smell of pies cooling on windowsills. You can hear the chatter of bargain hunters, the clinking of coins, and the calls of the vendors advertising their wares. But what's this? A vendor with a large sign advertising hot pies, fresh sausage rolls, and pastries for a mere few pennies. You're hungry and you don't have time to sit down for a meal. So you grab a pie, perhaps some spiced bread, and continue on your way, fast, easy, and satisfying. This was the essence of fast food in the marketplace. Historians still debate whether the spread of food stalls in these markets was driven more by a shift in consumer demand or by the influence of the market culture itself. However, one thing is clear: food vendors were able to exploit the existing trade networks in a way that made their products accessible to everyone. People from all walks of life, from traders to peasants, could now grab a quick bite without having to leave the market or waste precious time. But here's where things get interesting. These vendors didn't just create a quick solution to hunger, they began to build a culture. Fast food wasn't just about convenience. It became a social event, a way to be part of the hustle and bustle of daily life. A hot meal was no longer something you had to sit down for. It was something you could grab while chatting with friends, haggling with merchants, or even just passing time between tasks. Fast food was woven into the fabric of society, and the marketplace became its stage. Now that you're immersed in the fast-paced world of the 16th century English market, let's take a detour into something a little unexpected. How did the simple pie evolve into one of the first portable fast foods? At the heart of this development was a delightful little invention called the hand pie, or what we would call today a pâté, or pie on the go. These pies weren't just for the upper classes at fancy banquets. They were meant to be eaten quickly and easily by anyone from the working class to the merchant. You see, pies were already a popular food item, often stuffed with meat and vegetables, but they were typically served on plates or in large dishes. However, as demand for quick food grew, pie vendors began adapting them into individual servings, small handheld versions that could be eaten while walking, working, or even while riding in a carriage. Imagine it: a flaky, golden crust filled with hot spiced meat or vegetables, wrapped up and ready to eat without needing a fork or plate. It was the ultimate in fast, portable food. And what made these pies even more fascinating was the role they played in shaping the idea of food as something not just consumed, but also cherished for its convenience. Historians still debate whether these handheld pies were an intentional creation by the merchants, or if they simply adapted existing recipes to fit a new market need. Either way, these pies were a clear precursor to today's fast food items. They weren't just a novelty, they became a staple for the busy, bustling English society. With these hand pies, you could grab a quick meal and keep moving, whether you were heading to the next market stall or off to work in the fields. The simple pie, in all its portability, became one of the first truly fast foods. As you hold your hand pie, biting into the warm crust, it's easy to see the beginnings of a cultural shift. Food wasn't something to sit down for anymore. It was something to grab and go. A pie might seem like a humble meal, but back then, it represented an entirely new way of thinking about food and time. So, the next time you grab a sandwich or a slice of pizza to go, remember that the humble pie was there, paving the way long before fast food chains were a twinkle in anyone's eye. By now, you're probably getting a clearer picture of how the fast food culture was starting to develop, but who were the true pioneers, the names behind the bustling street stalls and hand pies? In the 16th century, while we may not have had the McDonald's moguls or the KFC founders, there were certainly a few key figures who helped shape the rise of fast food in England. These merchants and vendors were the ones who understood that time was of the essence, and they worked tirelessly to create food that people could eat quickly, yet still find filling and tasty. Take, for example, the infamous pie masters of London. These early vendors were known for making pies that were a notch above the rest. Spiced meats, hearty fillings, and perfectly crisp crusts that could stand up to the rigors of being carted around and eaten on the go. These vendors were some of the first to truly understand what it meant to be fast. They knew that food needed to be not only quick to prepare, but also convenient for the customer. These pie masters became icons in their own right, with some even going so far as to create signature pies that would be sold exclusively at their stalls. Historians still argue whether these early fast food moguls were simply capitalizing on a growing demand for convenience or if they were ahead of their time, anticipating the need for quick, accessible meals. Regardless of their motives, these vendors set the stage for the commercialization of fast food. As the popularity of these pies and portable meals grew, so did the profits for the merchants who sold them. It was a golden age for the quick meal industry, and while the names of these pioneers might not have made it into history books, their impact certainly did. These pie masters were the forefathers of fast food moguls, constantly refining their techniques to satisfy an ever-growing customer base. Their success was rooted in the simplicity of their product. A meal that was easy to make, easy to carry, and even easier to eat. And just like today's fast food chains, these vendors understood the importance of consistency. People came back because they knew exactly what they would get: delicious, hot food that wouldn't slow them down. As the fast food culture continued to grow, so did the need for what we today might call secret ingredients. What were the early fast food vendors doing to make their food not just filling but truly memorable? Well, they had one key trick up their sleeve: sauces. The idea of adding a special sauce or condiment to a meal wasn't new, but what these vendors did was elevate it. They didn't just serve dry meat pies or plain sausages. They loaded their food with flavorful, unique sauces that made everything taste just a little bit better. Imagine yourself at one of those bustling street stalls in 16th century London. You've got your hot meat pie fresh from the oven, but it's missing something. The vendor, with a wink, offers you a small dish of rich, spiced gravy or a tangy mustard sauce, promising it'll make the pie taste even better. You drizzle the sauce over the pie and, bam, everything changes. The pie that was already good is now something extraordinary. These sauces weren't just an afterthought, they were a key component that helped shape the fast food experience. Historians still debate the origins of these early fast food condiments. Some believe they were inspired by the sauces brought to England through the spice trade, while others think the English simply adapted sauces from their European neighbors. Whatever the case, these condiments were a game changer. Sauces and gravies became staples in street food culture, adding complexity to the otherwise simple dishes. The spices, herbs, and flavor combinations created a richer eating experience that kept people coming back for more. As time went on, the addition of sauces became more than just a way to enhance the flavor. It became part of the fast food identity. Today we've got a wide range of condiments from ketchup to hot sauce, but back then the variety was much more limited. Nevertheless, these early sauces were the precursors to the vast array of dips, dressings, and sauces that we now associate with modern fast food. Without those early innovations, the fast food world as we know it today might not exist. While the street vendors were busy cooking up delicious, spicy hand pies, skewered meats, and piping hot breads, there was another layer to this emerging fast food culture: its accessibility. The food was being made for the common folk, but it was also shaping the way food was seen socially. Fast food wasn't just a meal, it was a marker of class. Now, hold on before you roll your eyes and think, here we go with class systems again. Hear me out, this wasn't about whether you ate a pie or a roasted pheasant. This was about how food was changing from something that required time and effort to a quick, easy, and cheap solution that fit perfectly into the daily rhythms of urban life. In the 16th century, a hearty meal could take hours to prepare. Think slow-cooked stews, homemade breads, or elaborate roasts. But not everyone had the luxury of time to make those meals, especially if you were a working-class merchant, a busy craftsman, or a dock worker. For these people, the idea of eating a meal that was quick, filling, and didn't require much effort was revolutionary. And with the rise of these fast food stalls, food started becoming something you could get at any point in your day, whether you were walking to work, running errands, or even grabbing a bite during a short break at the market. Historians still argue whether the rise of fast food was truly a democratizing force. Did it bring everyone together in a shared experience, or did it simply further separate the classes? On one hand, fast food was accessible to the masses. It allowed anyone, regardless of social class, to enjoy a hot meal. On the other hand, it was also an easy way to make a quick profit off the poor, charging high prices for what might seem like humble fare. Fast food wasn't about the high-status meals you'd find at a banquet table. It was about convenience, affordability, and accessibility. It was food for people on the go, and for the first time, it was food that could fit into any social setting. Imagine yourself in one of those early English markets. You're just a regular person, not some fancy noble. You stop at a vendor's stall, grab a pie, and go about your day. You don't have to worry about preparing anything elaborate. No washing dishes, no wasting time, just food that fits your busy, bustling life. And that's the essence of what fast food became. A solution for those who needed something quick, cheap, and satisfying, whether you were a merchant, a worker, or a commoner on the go. As fast food grew in popularity, so did the scale at which it was produced and consumed. What began as humble street vendors selling pies and meat skewers in marketplaces slowly expanded into something much larger: fast food establishments. These vendors didn't just stick to the simple street corner stalls anymore. Soon, larger operations began to emerge, and the idea of fast food started to take on a new form. Picture this. You walk into a bustling food hall in London, and instead of seeing a single pie vendor, you see a row of different food stands, each serving a variety of quick, affordable meals. Some stalls serve pies, others sell hearty soups, and some even serve fresh bread rolls filled with spiced meats and vegetables. This wasn't just a food stall anymore. It was a miniature food court, a place where people could grab a meal in minutes, sit at a communal table, and be on their way. The idea of a centralized, fast food environment was taking shape, one that could serve a city full of busy workers, traders, and travelers. Historians still argue whether this was the first true form of a fast food chain, or if these were just independent vendors working together for convenience. Either way, this shift marked a turning point in fast food culture. No longer confined to a single street corner, fast food vendors were now able to serve more people, more quickly, from larger, more efficient setups. This wasn't about selling just one pie, it was about selling an experience, quick food that could be easily consumed and didn't take up too much of your precious time. With these larger establishments came the ability to experiment with different kinds of fast foods. Vendors began to innovate, offering not just pies but also stews, roast meats, and even quick soups that could be eaten from a bowl. And just like today, the competition grew fierce. If one vendor sold better pies, others had to improve their offerings to keep up. What started out as a few small stands selling pies evolved into a miniature food industry that catered to the growing demand for speed and convenience. Fast food was no longer just a street food, it was an integral part of the urban experience, quickly becoming a fixture of city life. As we move further into the 16th century, we begin to see the spread of fast food beyond the marketplaces and busy streets of London. The concept of quick, affordable meals caught on across England, and soon, it wasn't just the urban workers and merchants who were eating on the go. The demand for fast food began to grow beyond the cities, spilling into towns and villages across the country. But how did this quick meal culture spread so fast, and what made it so appealing to so many people? The key was, once again, the rapid urbanization of the period. As cities swelled with populations, the need for food that could be eaten quickly without disrupting the pace of the day became even more essential. But it wasn't just the cities that were embracing this new food culture. Fast food began to spread along the roads of England, where traveling merchants and traders needed quick, easy meals during their journeys. These travelers were often on tight schedules, moving from town to trade their goods. They needed meals that were easily portable and didn't require a long sit-down meal. Street food vendors, recognizing this demand, started to set up shop along the major trade routes, serving hot food to travelers who couldn't afford to waste time. Historians still debate whether this expansion was driven by the growing number of traveling merchants and the need for convenience, or whether it was simply a result of urban centers pushing the demand for quick food outwards. Regardless of the cause, it was clear that fast food had become a fixture not just in cities, but also on the roads and in the villages. This new food culture didn't just serve the wealthy or the noble, it served the people who needed it the most: the workers, the traders, and the travelers who were constantly on the move. Imagine yourself walking down one of those country roads. You've been traveling for hours, carrying your wares, when you suddenly come across a small stall, tucked at the side of the road. The smell of roasting meats fills the air, and you approach the stall, hungry after your long journey. You grab a hot pie or a skewer of meat, savoring the warmth as you continue on your way. Fast food was becoming a part of everyday life, not just for the urbanite but for the traveling worker as well. Now, as fast food spread to towns, villages, and even along trade routes, it wasn't just about convenience anymore. It was also about what fast food represented: social mobility and the changing nature of work. In the 16th century, the rise of quick food stalls was not just a product of a busy urban lifestyle. It reflected the growing importance of time in everyday life. But here's the twist: this wasn't only about the working class or the traveling merchant. Fast food was becoming a phenomenon that touched everyone, from nobles to peasants. Fast food, as we know it today, is often linked to the lower class or the convenience-driven needs of busy people. But in its early days, especially during the Tudor period in England, it was actually seen as a somewhat luxurious experience, particularly for the wealthy. Imagine for a moment, the same street vendors that were serving pies to the common folk were also creating exclusive meals for those who could afford them. Wealthy merchants and nobles might buy a specially prepared pie filled with exotic spices or rare meats, providing them with a taste of something a little more refined, something that set them apart from the everyday fare of the commoners. Historians still argue whether fast food was originally a classless phenomenon, as it was initially enjoyed by both wealthy and working-class people alike. Was it an egalitarian concept, or was it a way to elevate the experience of eating out even for the poor? Either way, it was clear that fast food was playing a significant role in England's evolving food culture. It wasn't just about feeding the masses, it was also about giving people from all walks of life a taste of something new and exciting. Now picture yourself in the bustling market square. You're from the middle class, perhaps a merchant or a tradesman. You've had a long day and you want to reward yourself, so you splurge on a beautifully crafted pie filled with rich meats, spiced perfectly and wrapped in a golden crust. Eating it quickly, on the go, you're part of a larger trend, a shift in how food was viewed and enjoyed. Fast food was no longer just a quick snack for the poor. It was a cultural phenomenon that spoke to the changing times, where even the wealthy were catching on to the convenience of a portable meal. As fast food continued to grow and expand across England, it wasn't just the food itself that was changing, it was the very concept of dining. Fast food wasn't about enjoying a meal with friends or family at a leisurely pace. It was about getting food when you needed it, without the sit-down rituals that came with more traditional meals. It was, in a sense, the birth of fast casual dining, a style of eating that emphasized speed and efficiency over the pleasure of sitting down for a long meal. But here's the thing, fast food didn't just change the way people ate, it changed the way they worked. Fast food became a symbol of the growing work ethic that defined the period. As the Industrial Revolution began to loom on the horizon, more and more people found themselves working longer hours with little time for meals. The rise of fast food reflected a shift toward a more work-focused society, one that needed meals that could keep people going without slowing them down. This wasn't just about convenience anymore, it was about maintaining productivity. Fast food vendors, ever the savvy entrepreneurs, recognized that their food could fuel the hustle and bustle of a society that was quickly changing. They were no longer just feeding people, they were feeding the very engine of the economy. With more workers than ever needing food on the go, these vendors created a new kind of restaurant, one that was built around the concept of quick service and portability. It was the beginning of what we now take for granted, food that wasn't just fast but designed for a society on the move. Historians still debate whether the rise of fast food was a response to a changing economy, or if it was simply a byproduct of increasing urbanization and the demand for quick meals. Either way, it was clear that fast food had become more than just a trend, it was a cultural shift. Food no longer existed just to nourish. It existed to fuel the new work culture that was emerging in cities and towns across England. Fast food became the food of progress, of industry, and of a society that couldn't afford to stop moving. Imagine yourself again in one of those bustling city streets, pie in hand, as you hurry to finish your work for the day. You don't have time for a long lunch. You don't even have time to sit down and eat. But that's okay because the pie in your hand is all you need to keep going. Fast food was there not just as a quick meal, but as a reflection of the rapidly changing world around you. As we come to the end of our journey through the 16th century rise of fast food, it's clear that what started as a humble street food culture has evolved into something much larger. The early fast food vendors who set up shop in London and across England laid the foundation for what we now know as one of the world's most influential industries. But while the impact of fast food is undeniable, it's important to take a moment to reflect on the legacy of those first street vendors, the ones who began it all. Fast food didn't just change the way we eat, it changed how we interact with food in general. From humble pies to exotic sauces, these early vendors transformed food from something that required time and care to something that could be consumed quickly on the go without slowing down the pace of life. They invented the idea of eating on the move, of getting a meal in minutes rather than hours, and they did so without the conveniences of refrigeration, microwaves, or modern food preservation techniques. Their ability to adapt to the needs of an urbanizing society was nothing short of visionary. Historians often debate whether fast food in its earliest form was driven by necessity or innovation. Was it born from the need for convenience in an increasingly busy world, or was it the result of the entrepreneurial spirit of those early merchants who saw a gap in the market and seized it? Whatever the answer, one thing is clear. These vendors were the forerunners of an industry that would grow far beyond the streets of London. And as we look at fast food today with its global chains and ever-expanding reach, it's easy to forget that it all began with a simple humble pie served from a small stall on a busy street corner. The essence of fast food, the idea that it should be quick, affordable, and accessible to everyone, was there from the very beginning. It was a product of its time, a response to the needs of a society that was rapidly changing, but it was also a precursor to something much bigger. Fast food in many ways embodies the spirit of the modern world. A world that values speed, efficiency, and convenience. Now, as you drift off to sleep, take a moment to consider how this little piece of history, one that began with simple street food, has shaped the world we live in today. It's a story of innovation, of food that fueled an ever-moving society, and of a cultural shift that we still feel every time we grab a quick meal on the go.